Memory prices are going through a ferocious surge right now. U.S. Investment bank Jefferies just predicted that memory prices will jump 40% to 50% quarter-over-quarter in the third quarter of 2026, followed by another 30% to 40% increase in the fourth quarter. After that, prices are expected to rise 40% to 45% year-over-year in 2027, and the uptrend won't slow down until at least 2028. On the supply side, the world's three major DRAM manufacturers, Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron, are already running at tight capacity. Half of their current total output is locked up in long-term agreements. At the same time, they're all expanding. Micron has already poured more than $150 billion into new capacity across the US and other markets. Samsung Electronics and SK Group recently unveiled a joint 10-year investment plan focused on semiconductors and AI infrastructure, totaling 2,000 trillion Korean won, or roughly 1.3 trillion US dollars. Combine that with Micron's spending, and the three memory giants are set to invest more than $1.5 trillion in total. Coincidentally, because these three players control over 90% of the market, they've also attracted antitrust lawsuits. U.S. law firm Hagens Berman is accusing them of colluding to manipulate prices and artificially create shortages. 01 The memory makers start burning cash according to local media reports. Samsung and SK Group's AI infrastructure investments are spread across semiconductors, displays, batteries, and data centers, with semiconductors taking the lion's share. Samsung plans to build 4 to 5 front-end wafer fabs in Gwangju and South Jeolla Province in southwestern South Korea, investing roughly 300 trillion won. The Yongin Semiconductor Cluster will get 6 more fabs at a cost of 360 trillion won. And the original completion target of 2048 has been pulled forward to between 2034 and 2035. An advanced packaging hub in Qianan and Anyang in South Chungcheong Province will see over 56 trillion won invested, positioned as a center for packaging R&D and production. Beyond semiconductors, more than 350 trillion won is earmarked for AI data centers, with the main site in Asan, South Chungcheong Province. SK Hynix plans to build 4 or 5 front-end wafer fabs in Gwangju and expand its NAND flash plant in Chongju, North Chungcheong Province, with a related investment of about 600 trillion won. The company had already kicked off some expansion projects earlier, but it hasn't clarified whether those are included in this newly announced plan. For example, SK Group Chairman Chae Tae-won said on June 11th that the M15X fab in Chongju is scheduled to start operations in the second half of 2026, with an initial monthly capacity of 40,000 wafers, ramping up to roughly 80,000 wafers in 2027. Meanwhile, the Yongin Semiconductor Cluster is accelerating. Its first phase is expected to be completed in early 2027, divided into 6 clean rooms, each gradually adding 60,000 wafers per month. The first fab alone could add 360,000 wafers of DRAM capacity per month by the first half of 2030. Micron's expansion is pushing forward across global markets, with the U.S. The core on its third fiscal quarter earnings call. CFO Mark Murphy gave capital expenditure guidance of about $10 billion for the fourth fiscal quarter and $27 billion for the full fiscal year 2026. He also previewed that quarterly capex in fiscal 2027 will be higher than the fiscal 2026 fourth quarter level, with more than half of the year-over-year increase coming from construction spending at its Boise, Idaho headquarters campus. Micron is building 2 new fabs, ID1 and ID2, with a total investment of $50 billion. They represent one of the largest cleanroom spaces ever built in the United States. ID1 is expected to produce its first DRAM wafers, including base dies for HBM, by mid-2027. ID2 is set to come online before the end of 2028 at the Syracuse, New York fab cluster. A $100 billion investment and the largest single private investment in New York State history, broke ground in January 2026. The Manassas, Virginia plant recently kicked off production of 1-alpha DDR4 technology, primarily serving the automotive, industrial, medical, aerospace, and defense markets that need mature node products. In Asia, a new DRAM fab in Hiroshima, Japan, with a $9.6 billion price tag, has already brought in EUV equipment that a previously acquired fab in Taiwan. China is expected to ship volume products by mid-2027, about a quarter ahead of schedule. A second cleanroom of similar scale next door is already under construction and will support EUV tools. Singapore will become Micron's advanced packaging center of excellence, focused on expanding HBM packaging capacity and expected to start contributing revenue in the first half of 2027. The 10-year investment in a new NAND fab, there is roughly $24 billion. Mehrotra specifically mentioned that Micron recently signed a multi-year EUV supply agreement with ASML, paving the way for the next generation 1 Delta node and beyond. There is one common thread in how all 3 companies are investing. They are all expanding, but they are all stretching the timeline and spreading out the burden. Nobody is betting on a short-term burst. On Micron's fiscal third quarter call, Sanjay Mehrotra explained that the whole industry is trying to add supply, but the speed of expansion is limited by several factors. Fab construction cycles are too long, equipment deliveries are getting slower, skilled workers are in short supply, and energy and water infrastructure can't keep up. He called these structural constraints. Given these constraints, the tight supply situation is unlikely to ease in the next 2 to 3 years. 02 HBM becomes a strategic bargaining chip compared with traditional DRAM. What's really keeping downstream companies up at night is HBM, or high bandwidth memory. The demand logic for this stacked high bandwidth memory is unlike anything we've seen before in the memory industry. When Jensen Huang met with SK Group Chairman Che Tae-won in Seoul in June, he put it bluntly: SK Hynix's plan to double its memory wafer capacity by 2030 is nowhere near enough, he said. We are already procuring from SK Hynix, spending billions of dollars a year, and that number is going to grow significantly. According to the calculations of analyst Finn in his AI semiconductor endgame deduction, the HBM capacity required per GPU is growing about 40% every year, while the supply side's capacity increase is 14%, and DRAM bit density growth is only 9%. The gap between demand and supply just keeps getting wider. What that means is that DRAM supply growth sits at only 24%, creating a growth gap of 16 percentage points. Even more critical is that traditional DRAM is a standardized product. In a down cycle, demand crashes, prices collapse, and the industry faces massive losses that HBM sidesteps that trap entirely. Finn argues that while HBM still stacks DRAM on top, the base die has a custom nature. customers need to sign long-term agreements with memory makers to lock in capacity. At the same time, AI demand is more predictable. When prices drop, it actually incentivizes customers to pack in more memory, creating a floor. Moreover, because the technology cycle moves fast and old inventory depreciates quickly, memory makers prefer to race for qualification on fabless customers' next-generation designs rather than fight a price war in the existing market. Based on Fin's analysis, HBM has shifted from the traditional 1 year of profit, 3 years of loss memory cycle to a growth cycle where you make a ton on the way up and you don't lose much on the way down. He believes that as long as the attention mechanism inside the transformer architecture isn't disrupted, the exponential demand for HBM will not stop. 03, who's fighting for Korean capacity. In June, Jensen Huang held a dinner meeting in South Korea with SK Group Chairman Chae Tae-won, SK Hynix CEO Kwak No-young, and others. After the meal, Huang confirmed to the gathered media that Nvidia's newly launched Vera CPU will use SK Hynix DRAM, and that the two sides are preparing for massive scale cooperation in the second half of this year and next. On the same day, Nvidia and SK Hynix officially announced a multi-year technology collaboration agreement covering AI supercomputing, extending into robotics, digital twins, and semiconductor manufacturing. Huang is not the only one eyeing Korea's memory capacity. In March, AMD CEO Lisa Su made her first trip to South Korea since taking office in 2014. Her first stop was Samsung Electronics Pyeongtaek campus in Gyeonggi Province. The Memorandum of Understanding they signed covers multiple layers. Samsung will supply HBM4 memory for AMD's next-generation AI accelerator, the MI455X, and also develop customized DRAM solutions for the 6th-generation EPYC processor codenamed Venice. The reason heavyweights are flying to Seoul is essentially that memory is transforming from a general-purpose component you could just order as needed into a strategic resource that demands a CEO's personal attention. 4 Micron flips the table. Apple gets burned in this wave of price hikes. Micron's stance is even more hardline than Samsung's or SK Hynix's. After posting record third fiscal quarter results, Micron Chief Commercial Officer Sumit Sudna gave a rare interview to the Wall Street Journal in which he dredged up the past. He revealed that during the last industry downturn, Micron was unable to invest in capacity expansion, partly because some customers were very aggressive on pricing and bought at the lowest price, squeezing supplier gross margins into negative territory. He said Micron told those few customers at the time that this approach was not constructive. Due to exceptionally poor pricing and profitability, many industry investments were halted outright in 2023. Although no names were named, the customer Micron was venting about is widely believed to be Apple. Apple has long been known for driving a hard bargain with suppliers, using long-term purchase contracts to lock in low prices, squeezing its own costs to the bone while pushing its end product prices higher. However, the supply chain hardball stance that indirectly triggered this memory famine is now coming back to bite Apple itself. Apple CEO Tim Cook recently admitted that this round of memory shortages is a once-in-a-century flood, and that price increases are inevitable. Not long after those words were spoken, Apple implemented across-the-board price hikes on product lines including MacBook, iPad, Apple TV, and Vision Pro. On that day, Apple's market cap evaporated by $265 billion. According to the Financial Times, the company is now quietly lobbying Washington hoping to get permission to buy memory from Chinese memory chip maker CXMT to in Apple's view. CXMT hasn't been deeply embroiled in the battle for AI HBM supply and could, in theory, offer cheaper memory. Gartner analyst Ranjit Atwal commented on the situation, saying, "Even Apple is not immune. Despite all their expertise and long-term planning, this has gone beyond their ability to limit the impact. Right now, everyone is predicting that the memory shortage will ease sometime after 2028 at the earliest. But once the power structure flips, it's very hard to go back to how things were in the memory market. Buyers won't be able to regain the kind of take-what-you-want leverage they used to have. The commodity era of memory is coming to an end, and end-device makers have not yet fully adapted to this new trend."